Welcome to the new episode of Exports Insights. Today with us, we have Alexander Mardian, who is part of the Deal German Institute of Food Technology, but also a friend of mine and a person that I've known for quite some time, who has been highly experienced for over 40 years in international trade, entrepreneurship, innovation, training of and mentoring of export managers, of entering new markets. Personally, I know him at the time when he was heading the Foreign Trade Chamber, AHK, and when he was delivering training of trainers for export managers 10 or more years ago. So welcome to the podcast, Alexander.
Thank you very much, Vasco.
So let's dive into it. I mean, just since you've led the Foreign Trade Chamber and now you lead an innovation hub. So maybe you can tell us how those two connect and how does the support needed by the established business service organizations different from the support of high-tech food tech startup needs that you're working now?
I would say it's similar. I mean, when I was heading the AHK the delegation of the German industry in Sarajevo, it was more about helping local companies in the first place to open export markets, meaning international scalability. What I'm doing with startups or youngly established enterprises on the European level in the agtech and food tech sector is pretty much the same. It's all about international scalability. It means how can I find export markets? I mean, having in mind that 60% of the global GDP is generated by exports or external trade, let's put it this way. It's one of the must-to-dos for startups because it's all about scalability, and this can only be achieved if you go international.
So, you jumped a little bit, but you have been, let's say, a mentoring cluster trainer. And so when mentoring startups, what is the limit? Because you said you have to go international right away. So what is the litmus test, let's say, for deciding if a company is truly ready for its first international market and going global?
Well, I would...
Is there any?
I would say, first of all, I'm dealing a lot with technicians and scientists, which is a specific challenge in industry. It's fun, but it's a challenge. So usually I start when they achieved the technology readiness level 6 or something. So basically, the product could work, the innovation could work, but then it is, especially when you're talking about deep tech innovations, it's really a bigger challenge to check what's out there already. What are the USPs? What are really the gaps in the industry or at the farm side level, depending on what kind of technology you would like to introduce to the market. So I would say it's a bit more complex than training an export manager or CEO of an existing company with a fixed product or service portfolio trying to go international. So we have an additional dimension.
So how do you do it? Because the food tech is changing very fast, much faster than in traditional businesses. So are there any additional aspects to consider or some that are more important now than they used to be?
I mean, when it comes to agtech as well as to food tech, I mean, it's circulating around sustainability. We are heavily experiencing the effects of the climate change. Just traveled Europe at the end of last year and this year in a new EU project called Climate Pannonia, which is basically focusing on the Pannonian region, covering northern Serbia. And it's basically the same effects that we are seeing in southern Italy and southern Spain and parts of Portugal, that technology might save us or might save the yields which we need in the international trade. And it is this interdependence between countries. So for instance, if southern Spain is losing a lot of agricultural fields for producing vegetables, we have a shortage of that vegetables here in Western Europe. So basically, it's about what kind of technologies could be needed. It could be water retention, it could be soil improvement, it is precision farming, including irrigation system. On the food tech side, basically the same thing. It's valorization of side streams. So how can we produce food products with a protein content out of the side streams which we are not using today? For instance, spent grain in the brewery industry or whey in the dairy industry. So it's not necessarily, it's just partially around new products. It's more around how can I produce more efficient? How can I make, if you talk from the food side, How can I make the food safe? And this requires technology. Usually these technologies are brought in by scientific people and technicians. This applies to the food tech side as well as to the ag tech side.
I mean, that's interesting enough. You mentioned it's more on the engineering side, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my question here is, how do you combine that? How can a startup start technically doing all that properly?
I mean, let's start maybe at TRL6. So we know that the innovation is working. This is pretty comparable to an established company who's looking for new export markets. You have to find customers outside your own beachhead market. You have to clearly articulate your USPs and your value against competitors. And then maybe comparable as well to companies I visited on the Western Balkans. It's the challenge of integrating in existing value chains, which is maybe the interesting thing at the moment, to swift from we can produce cheaper to we can be part of your value chain. And this applies to startups, tech startups, as well as to, let's say, to the production industry when we talk about metal processing, for instance, on the Western Balkans. Challenges sometimes the same: how to cope with people, how to find markets, how to select markets, to understand export not only as a coincidence or an accident, but really to implement it into a strategy for the own business.
Yeah, I get that, but I'm mentoring some startups myself, and usually it's they're either too strong on the technical side and like the sales and the market penetration and the go-to market,
or vice versa.
They're missing the, let's say, the other stuff. So is that your experience as well, or not really?
Yeah, that's my experience as well. So bringing the techies to a point really where they look at markets, understand markets, and see that markets, even inside Europe, are totally different. Talk to people about what they need and what they want instead of just promoting the new innovation is a challenge. And this is maybe a bit different from the classical industry, which I said that before, have their existing product portfolio.
So what would you say are the key differences? Talking about high technology, what would be the key difference between the existing ones and the new ones in entering new markets?
I mean, the new ones, the deep tech startups, know that they have to internationalize the business. So they look at the sum size of market and what they can penetrate. And then they look at the potential customers. Where they usually fail is a customer segmentation. And secondly, to really talk to people face to face and to really understand the pains in the market and how they could differentiate from existing solutions, which are implemented. They bring something more techy, something more sustainable, but they have to understand that it has to pay back for the customers if you're talking about process innovations. And this is basically the biggest hurdle. In the classical industry, let's say at the automotive supply industry or metal machine working industry, they know what they can do best. And I think most of them were trying to get away from low labor contracts to more specialized contracts where they really become a partner of an existing supply chain. And this is, I would say, the basic difference between startups. People usually, as you said before, the techies, do not really have, in most cases, understanding and a feeling for doing business B2B. They think everyone has to buy because the innovation is so nice. And when I start to coach them, I was at 30 to 40% of pivoting and say, well, this is maybe not exactly what my customer group is looking for, because they want to have some changes, or it's simply not hitting their pain points.
Germany is a leading food export nation. So European and German ones, are there any regulatory blind spots that German food tech startups often overlook when entering new markets?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's understanding the regulatory framework, which is quite complicated inside the EU. For instance, when you talk about food products, you can easily get into the challenge of novel food regulations, which will take you years and years sometimes, and a lot of money. So regulation underestimated, procedures underestimated that you need the right people to sell and these are not only scientists and technicians sometimes. This is really people understanding how to build up long-term relationships. It's too high customer acquisition costs, which is basically resulting from the fact that there are no strategies to bind customers. So in addition to what we face at the established industry, it's additional challenges basically occurring from not a lot of experience in doing international business. I would say this is the main difference. Then on top of that, if you look at how to get access to market information, the times, as you know, as a consultant, have changed dramatically. So you can use all the AI tools which we are having today, which seems to make life easier at one point. But on the other hand side, you really have to understand the context. And if you can get smarter quick, your competitors can do that as well. So I would say it's sometimes really the dance between a very useful tool, getting access and even getting contacts. And on the other hand side, you're not the only one who is basically enjoying these advantages of AI models. So it's different. I think international trade in digitalized times changed a lot from face-to-face or from person-to-person relations to a more digitalized environment. Can be helpful. It can make things quicker, but it's not guaranteeing long-term relationships with your customers.
This is great in digital times, but you're working 4 decades in global trade, in new market entry, in export management, in all these aspects. So is there a single or are there any main significant changes you have seen in how companies approach international markets today compared to 3 decades ago? And what are the mistakes to watch over?
I mean, first of all, I would really say not to have a strategy. What market and why? So it's this hit and run. If I can fix an export deal, I will fix an export deal. And we all know that it is not working like that. So you really have to look at the markets in specific, and sometimes it's not really the biggest markets, which are the most attractive ones. It's the one where you fit in with a certain degree of your specialization. And sometimes it's really, for the start, better to focus on niche markets. And I mean, the great opportunities getting along with that, it's that a lot of European companies, German included, of course, who were outsourcing to overseas markets are coming back to Europe. And they want to have suppliers around the corner. But it's more than sending your products. It's more the integration in the supply chains, which is the biggest challenge. And this cannot be really solved with the help of AI tools. You really got to talk to the people, have to understand their business. And the times where we can argue with low prices in a lot of, let's say, more technical environments are over. So what people or what bigger companies in Europe are looking for, and even smaller ones who are very specialized, is let's find suppliers in Europe, but they have to match. It's more a partnership than it is just the customer and supplier relation.
So strategy, defining the market, getting the specialization, outsourcing doesn't work. Pricing is no longer a thing. I like this. One, AI tools cannot help you get integrated into supply chains. What are your thoughts about all this? I mean, on LinkedIn, when I open up, and there are a lot of go-to-market engineers now as a new role that say, buy this tool, make this integration. You don't need the sales process from before. Your pipeline is full. You're selling like crazy and stuff like that.
I mean, for suppliers in the first place, it's, I would say, to become tier suppliers. So to get from level 3 to 2, for instance. For startups, it's a bit of a different challenge sometimes, but at the end of the day, it's pretty comparable. If I bring a new technology in food processing, I have to match into the production line. And if I disturb somehow the supply chain, or if it is too critical to integrate, I will not make business. Same thing in AgTech. And if you're talking AgTech, we're not necessarily talking or only talking about the smaller farmers. We're talking about the big, more industrial-like farming environments where a lot of new things are popping in besides the classical way of doing agriculture. So it's energy production, for instance. So you really have to see what can you do in generating additional income streams, and how can you maybe with a specialized agricultural production fit into the supply chain of the food industry, which is the biggest challenge because in most countries in Europe, we really have a very concentrated market, meaning that If you talk to the big ones, it's a challenge and you really get to be prepared. You need a strategy. You have to understand the regulatory framework. You have to have legal and customs knowledge still if you are more exporting from outside the EU. You need dedicated and trained people who understand the business, which is a huge bottleneck sometimes to really find these people who can help you. And then it's the complexity of logistics, which is getting harder and harder. Just in time, at the spot. And these points are sometimes totally underestimated. These are the practicalities in export trade. The practicalities are pretty much the same like they have been 20 years ago.
Are the same, you said, as 20 years ago or no? The practicalities?
Yeah. It's about, I mean, you receive an order, you finally found a customer. You need a strategy to find your customer. Otherwise, you will pay additional money to find your customers. You have to supply in time. You have to be ready. You have to be able to respond to changes if you're more working in the specified industrial sectors. The practicalities haven't changed too much, and you need to cope with them. The additional challenge might be that it has to be faster than it has been 20 years ago. Fast. And reliability is one of the core aspects. And you got to prove that every day.
So in this perspective, I mean, I know you're doing market validation. You're producing scalability analysis and preparing companies for scalability, checking validity of markets. So in this perspective, I know time has cut with this digital era, but are there any other differences that might be significant? Where do you see this heading? Let's put it that way. Because, I mean, we need the strategy, we need the analysis, we need to define the market. So everybody is faster, as you said, even our competitors using the new tools. So let's say not for an existing one, but for a startup, what are the things to consider first, like steps? And or maybe let's put it this way. In the first 100 days, if a company is entering new market tomorrow, what should be their top 3 priorities for the first 100 days when entering a new market, let's say?
They should have really a clear idea about their potential customer target group. First of all, they have to see national and regional differences. So they really have to pick up very fast the capability for market intelligence. And this is, for instance, one point where AI could make it a bit easier. You still have to check the results. You maybe use different AI tools to do that, but it really can help you to understand market changes. More positively seen, I would see in this global constellation with China arising as one of the biggest players on the planet when it comes to industry, and the sometimes critical position of the US leading to a higher focus on economic development, industrial reorganization in Europe, it's opening new doors. And this applies to startups as well as to SMEs, for instance. So the focus, I want to have my partners in Europe when it comes to the supply chains, for instance, could be a big challenge. And the whole green tech thing is opening new doors where we say, hey, we have to reduce energy input, which is one of the key questions in a lot of the processing industries. And we have to fix that problem on a European level. That could really help. So it has positive effects because it's changing, and changes bring opportunities. It's not only a threat. What we gotta do, where the approach of the Chinese government is maybe coming to an end at the end of the day. We see it, I would say, with pretty clear eyes in the industry. And if you inform yourself good enough, I mean, you will somehow find your niche. This is usually what I'm telling startups. Focus on the customer, not only on the tech solution, what the customer really needs. And keep in mind that you have to reach a price level with innovation where the technology is paying back. No one will pay for sustainability. There's not a legal must to do that, for instance.
Well, you touched several points now. I don't know where to start, whether to ask you about supply chain. What do you think about the US, China, and European supply chains in relevance to what you mentioned? Well, let's go one by one, maybe.
Okay.
What you're saying, I mean, because the question was about startups, so you're saying no longer global supply chains with this complexity of China, US, maybe tariffs or stuff like that, that the European companies should focus more on the European markets. Did I get
No,
that
no.
right?
I mean, Europe is one of the biggest exporters. Just
Yeah,
saying, the landscape is changing. So of
yeah.
course we will be heavily, as Europe, be involved in international trade. So it's about fixing new trade agreements, which we have recently seen on the European level. These complex situations in supply chains where I get a lot of my supplies from Asian markets and have to readjust it on the European level and send it back to Latin America, things like that. This is a degree of complexity which is sometimes pretty hard to handle. So positive as I am, I would say it's bringing new opportunities for our industry. Either new players in the market, like potentially startups. We all know that out of 100 startups, 50-60% will never make it to the market. Nonetheless, it's not a loss. And what I'm telling the industry is, if you're looking for innovation, have a look at the European startup ecosystem, because even a startup fails, there are still the bright minds behind it, which could make perfect employees for your own company. And you will see outside of the box and in the innovation sphere, we are, as the European Union reflects lately, too slow. We can do it. We are innovative, but we are too slow. This is owed to a pretty complex regulatory framework and maybe to a high degree of administration.
So, I mean, I know Europe is high on sustainability as a mandatory requirement for new safety, new food markets in many aspects. Do you think globally sustainability will be a mandatory requirement, or it will be a nice to have competitive advantage?
No, to a certain extent, it is a requirement because in order, I mean, it was a bit weakened. I mean, the regulation on the supply chain, which was very complex in Europe, has been lowered. Nonetheless, when we see new business models, for instance, and we had that in the pre-discussion, working with carbon credits, European companies have to prove sustainability. It means that they have to match the regulatory framework when it comes to the reduction of CO2 emissions. It's on one side a market, and on the second side, it's opening the doors for providers who can bring solutions. And we have them out of the market. It's pretty new, but it makes sense. And I'm pretty optimistic that industry partners can play a really leading role in bringing these type of innovations. This is besides all the challenges a company has. I mean, market validation, compete on value and not only on price, find the niches in the market. Then the biggest challenge of integration into supply chain, invest in standards for certification, build professional export structures, and so on and so forth. This is an additional element. And I'm pretty optimistic that especially people who are coming fresh into the, let's say, industrial system will realize that because they're thinking from the sideways. And I'm constantly, when I'm traveling Europe, I see that sometimes industry or let's say company owners from pretty small companies are more agile in changing. And we have to adapt to changes. That is maybe one of the key challenges in the restructured new industrial system.
I mean, so looking ahead 5-10 years from now, you're seeing European startups leading the sustainability solutions globally?
I see, first of all,
What
European
things should
companies. I see
Hmm?
European companies, and we have to do it. We have to find our positioning. We cannot produce as cheap as China. This should not be our goal. So we have to come up with innovative and sustainable solutions. I mean, looking at it from a broader context means that we really have to include innovations in the market. For instance, better sustainability, higher energy efficiency, which could save us. If we are not able to manage that, then it will be very hard to compete against China or India, for instance, in the future. So what's hindering us a bit in Europe is maybe the complexity of things, a pretty high degree on bureaucracy and regulations. But I think since a year or so, we have seen that these things, even on the European level, can be changed. And for the partners in Europe, but not being part of Europe, I think it's maybe one more signal to really push harder for the integration into the EU. Without that, it's going to be pretty hard to survive.
Okay. I have so many questions arising now. I don't think we have the time to cover them all. We are talking about the food. You have been in innovation. You have also lived in the Balkan region for several years.
No, 14 years, Neto.
Let's put it in that perspective. I mean, you have worked, lived, and cooperated with the companies in Europe all around, in the Balkans, in Germany, and all around the world. So what would you say is the impact in the B2B, let's say, food technology sales? What is how much does the cultural fit or difference impact the bottom line? Is there a difference or not really?
Yeah, of course there are cultural differences, which is good, which makes us more diverse, challenges more to understand them and to get a feeling for that. Of course it's diverse. I mean, people in Italy are eating differently than people in Northern Europe. Agricultural settings are different and industrial settings are different. But at the end of the day, I mean, if I talk to younger export managers, it's about curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
You do not see that as a burden that we have different culture. You see it as an asset, and you are curious to learn more and to integrate. And what makes business still and this especially it implies to the SMEs, it's long-term relations where you can really understand yourself as your supplier and your customer on a very individual, personal level. This is building trust. This is saving long-term income from the export industry or from export sales. Because, I mean, if you look at very small countries like Northern Macedonia, for instance, I mean, without internationalization exports, what's missing a bit is the intra-regional trade, for instance, on the Western Balkans. Always, it's mostly 70% is going to the European Union. The countries, for instance, there are too small to really make it. So it has to be more unified, or they have to become part of the European Union where things are easier. As I said, I'm pretty optimistic. The challenges, and positively seen, even with very young export managers. And I recently joined a delegation visit to the UN institutions in Rome. I saw people who are flying all around the world from one day to the other, and they are jumping from one cultural context to another. And they're able to handle it because they are able to build trust and they are curious to see and to understand the cultural differences.
Are there any specific strategies you would recommend for cross-border cooperation of startups, corporates, and government bodies that have built two or more economic development agencies and supporting
and some companies as well, yeah.
And several companies as well. You have been in the 90s training of semi-export managers in how to enter new markets. And you have been training a lot of people around the world in doing so. There are two aspects. One is how can a small business leverage these public institutions and not get lost in the bureaucracy, especially in the area of food, agriculture, sustainability, energy, and all those, and talk about export at the same time. And on the other side, I mean, do you have any good examples maybe or strategies for this to work out?
I mean, strategy even for smaller companies is, if it is food related or agri related, ag tech related, or any other type of industry which I have seen in my professional life, get you the right people who can do that. Pay them well. Even if the teams are pretty small, you really have to depend on each and every employee of yours. And you have to nurture them, you have to train them, you have to give them access, and you have to deliver competencies to them. This is a precondition. And I saw young startups, young ladies, mid-20, who were masters in that. And sometimes it's really, you have to be the right person to sell, always. Sometimes technicians or scientists are not so good at that, with exceptions. But this is a key thing, that you have someone who's able to build relationships, long-term relationships, because as I said maybe a couple of times before, it's about the integration into value chains. It's not hit and run like it used to be. Fast business, in, out, and basically it's very hard to bring something on the market where the customers is coming to you and say, please, can I have it? So you're always competing. So the second level is really to understand your competition. What can you do differently. And if it is not the price, I would never. I mean, this is what I learned in 40 years of external trade. It's don't compete about the price. Compete about the values that you're bringing to your customer. That is saving you at the end of the day. And I think this makes European business owners different from others. I do not want to mention the US and China maybe again. So it's long-term relationships, reliability, integration into value chains. As soon as you understand that, even if you are a very small company or if you're just about starting your company as an entrepreneur or a startup, if you absorb these two things, then you can build a structure around you. So it's all about information. Because trying something and fail usually costs money. So better make sure that it worked to the maximum extent that you can achieve if you're good informed. That is a basic advice. All the rest, I mean, access to information, to practices, to tools are so easy to get today, but they are worthless if you do not understand the background. So make sure that you understand where you want to go, what you want to do, and have the right people on your side.
Is there a talent gap in the space you're working in Europe now? What is the biggest barrier to export growth today? Is it lack of capital, lack of technology, or lack of qualified people with international mindset?
I think it's a combination.
Mm-hmm.
It's a combination, and I mean the positive thing is that the industry will adjust and change. Ever since I started to coach companies and first 20 years of my career, beside running my own businesses, I was really consulting other company owners. And ever since I feel we cannot get the right people. So, I mean, if we have that problem, then it's a long lasting one. It didn't start 10 years ago. It started 30, 40 years ago. But I doubt it. It was always a challenge to find good people, but it depends on the perspective. When I want to find people who are doing the job without asking for a pretty low salary, then the positioning in Europe might be not that good. If I'm able to select better people, to really create a system inside my own environment where I can train them and can nurture them, then I'm on the right side. And the most successful businesses I have seen, let's say more on the bigger SME sides, that have been companies with really good people inside. So I think this is the most important factor, the human factor. If you do not have the right people, your products or your technology can be great, but it's really hard to make a successful business out of that. The rest is, and this is positively seen, what really young people who have grown up in a very digital environment can bring is that they think out of the box and from the sides. And you just have to teach them how to interpret the findings.
Now, what does that mean? Teach them to interpret the findings. So
you will find a lot of information. You will find information about trends. You will find information about how our market's developing. And the interpretation of that is, what does it mean for my company or for our company? How can we integrate? How can we join? How can we participate? Or is it maybe too complex? Is it too new? Is it too phony? Is it too fast? Doesn't it match our strategy? That is the interpretation.
So, interesting one. Maybe, do you have a framework, a mentor, or a book you can share that maybe on top of your mind?
Let's go.
That helps you how to coach you.
Books are so old-fashioned.
Yeah, now it's a link. It's a.
Yeah. No, I mean, I recently wrote an article for the food industry on sustainability. What does that mean? And markets more focusing on the German or German-speaking markets. I mean, you find a lot of good blogs like your one here, and you. I think you have to invest your time, for instance, to watch a blog like Export Insights, where you can learn a lot, where you can listen to other people, how they are handling it. So initiative is really great, bringing expertise from different sides together by live people in a small chat. Then people can look at it and say, well, I understand, or maybe I have another vision or another view on things. And then you can read a lot. I mean, so if I really have a core topic, I mean, use Perplexity, ChatGPT, or all the other bots, and really see where are the sources. This is the key. Where are the sources, and then you can dig a bit deeper. So access to knowledge is so easy these days, and it doesn't cost anything.
The interpretation is and understanding it is a different story.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm currently, I mean, just to share, I'm currently working as a fractional chief revenue officer of an AI startup, and they're great and they do great things. But what I've seen in the meantime is, as you said at the beginning, let's say the cost of entry or the barrier to entry is almost zero. And it's a question of how fast the markets will be taken over. I mean, who gets to the customers and the customer success faster. I just wanted to maybe go practical, because Experts Insights podcast is made for SMEs and for startups and for leaders in that pool. So do you think there are any specific technologies or business models that are underhyped in the food export?
In the food system, it's really, I mean, you have to look, you have to have a look at the European supply chains. Who is delivering what to what countries? And it will change dramatically. This is opening opportunities. You have to look at markets where we find a pretty good margin in the food industry. In Germany, for instance, the margins are sometimes really not that good, especially for SMEs. So if you are from Southeast Europe, usually agricultural output, because of different climate conditions, is more favorable. When it comes to certain fruit and vegetables, you really have to see which market do I want to go, with whom am I competing. Can I fix certain issues by technology to a certain extent? Soil improvement, for instance. So following up market trends and the development of markets can open doors to SMEs and to, let's call them SMEs, let's not talk about startups. Let's to small companies, small and medium-sized enterprises. So you got to find the right markets for your product outside your own country. And if you sit down as a company owner and think, what do I need for that? As we said, okay, you need good people, motivated people. You need information in the first place. How are processes handled when it comes to regulations, when it comes to customs? Then you have to go there and you have to talk to people with a clear idea what you can offer. And the basic question, like always in business, why should you pick me as a supplier if you go to talk to someone? It's the same thing if you go to a fair or if you have a face-to-face meeting with someone. And then you really have to present the answers and you have to stick to them and say, what can I do better than my competitors? Is it reliability? Is it quality? Is it integration in your supply chains? What does it mean? And these are basically the preconditions. And mindset when it comes to changes, I find sometimes a bit more agile in smaller countries, not in really established industrial settings. This is a big plus for the small companies. And it doesn't matter where you're coming from if you have the right solution. It doesn't matter anymore. The old cliches are pretty much not applicable anymore. So even small companies, if they are agile, if they look for the customers, if they look for the gaps in the market, if they focus on what they can do better than their competitors, if they understand that they are not, should not compete about prices, but about quality and reliability, they will find their way, I'm pretty sure.
So can you share a failure in your career that maybe paved the way to later success for you? Now I'm changing the view a little bit.
I made so many mistakes in my life, believe me. I think it's really started. If you're good at sales, you sometimes have the probability that you're also good at selling your ideas to yourself and believe in them, maybe for too long. So, yeah, I mean, pretty much investing too much time on things which have not worked, and I could have known better if I was better informed. It's a constant challenge. Before you invest, think about twice, because capacities are limited financially as well as in time. So, and basically, biggest mistake I would say, but what you should avoid is these constantly recurring mistakes, and you really have to develop, and maybe I learned that at a later stage of my career, is listen to other people, how they do it, how they cope with that, and then see what's useful for yourself when you do things. That's basically it. I mean, lifelong learning and understanding and processing information, getting and processing information because you invest into something.
So, well, you didn't say anything concretely. You didn't want to share some special one, but maybe pushing the buttons again. Maybe that there was a mistake that led you to a much better success in a certain point in time, because you have quite a big career, Alexander. You had like 5 companies. You have been mentoring mayors, companies, development agencies, chambers. You have been connecting German and Austrian, Serbian companies. Food tech, agri-tech innovation is your thing now. And I know myself that you have been involved in, let's say, leading the way on the training of export managers from SMEs, how to spread in Eastern Europe in the 90s. So probably there are some things in your life that happened that you thought they were a mistake, but came out to be the best thing possible. So a little bit positive.
Vasco, this is a tough question. I mean, for instance, when I went to the Western Balkans, I intended to stay for a year, and I spent there 14 years. And a lot of my friends were asking, "What are you doing there?" I mean, these small countries, complicated settings, and they said it is a mistake. I always liked it. And at the later stage of my career, I really understand how things are working on the European level, first of all. Second mistake that I really were too pushy in convincing people on the political level to change things, ignoring a bit the local circumstances. Big mistake, which really put me into trouble. But the positive thing is, at the end of the day, I understand, and I was able to invest these experiences into new projects, which makes it really easier. Sometimes you think it is a mistake, and short term it is a mistake. On the long term, if you come to the right findings of your experience, it's more positive, and that happened to me various times.
Thanks for sharing that. And you came for a year and you stayed 14, so I guess definitely it seems it was great.
It was interesting and challenging, and I really liked it. Yeah.
If someone listens to this and doesn't have a clue where to start, you say to do a market research, to validate the market, to check the competition in a market, to compare markets, what would be the first steps to take, or the necessary 1 to 3 things? It doesn't have to be a big one.
Vasco, if I understand you right, you mean if someone doesn't know what to do, I mean, not being in business.
Starting their business. So
starting their business.
They're starting their first.
The first advice is focus on what you can really do. What can you do? Do you know people which you can integrate in your own little new company? And what kind of competences do they have? And then look around. What comes next? What do you really like? Because to do things which you do not like usually fail. And if you spot the weak points in certain industries, if you say, okay, I have an idea about a solution, and sometimes the solution is I do things better than my competitors, and do that. It's not rocket science sometimes. Partially, we're talking about innovation, bringing in new things, but it can be innovation in business models also. It's not only technical innovations. If you really have a bright idea to take the burden of people running their businesses, and you can serve as a service provider. So I met a couple of IT-related companies when it comes to knowledgement, getting information, and they sometimes develop so helpful tools that it's not the big app that everyone is using, but it's a something which people can use. In IT-related fields recently, let's say in the previous 3 to 4 years, I had a lot of teams, even before the big hype about AI started, were bringing AI-based solutions to run your business more seamlessly when it comes to regulation, when it comes to documents, when it comes to reporting requirements. Everything which can save time, every solution which can save time is appreciated by business partners. And for instance, if you can bring up something there, test it on the market, quickly test it, adjust or fail, or say if I'm on the right way, if people really like what I can potentially offer, then focus.
I like this approach. I think that there are a lot of changes in the business models in this. I mean, we are talking about innovation, making a, how is it called, minimum viable product, testing it on the market, getting early feedback is somehow becoming the standard in this new technology. And or in the good examples, there are still companies that do the long term. Of course, there are some industries that need to, but the long term in closed doors innovation and come with a product that it's overburdened, the big app that nobody buys. It might be perfect, but the market is the only judge to follow. Yeah. Let's put it that way. So are there any, I mean, I still have a lot of questions. Like I'm thinking like, what are the key trends to look at? What are the business models that you've seen change that are working out in innovation in these last few years and are taking on, at least in, if not wider, maybe in food and production and agri-tech and food tech?
I mean, AgTech, as I said before, AgTech and food tech, basically it's about sustainability. It's about securing food supplies at the end of the day, even in Europe. So we have a big gap of oil seeds coming into Western Europe after the war in Ukraine started, and it got to be replaced. So innovative solutions could be plant-based fat alternatives with full functionalities. In agriculture, it is, how can I save input from fertilizers, input from water, rich in higher energy efficiency. If I look at other industries, left and right, IT is the same thing. How can I be faster? How can I get more with less input? If I look at the classical industry, for instance, when I worked on the Balkans, I had a lot of meetings with the automotive supply industry, machine building industry. How can I get from a small metal shop into a service solution provider? It's always the same. And it will remain. It's still the same. And I saw very, very positive, for instance, all over the Balkans, starting from the scratch, starting in a little garage or workshop, and 10 years later, you're really talking on eye level and how to integrate in international value chains. It's possible if you understand the gap from your customers, and if you if you have a realistic picture about your own capabilities. What can you do? What do you like? And where can you get the people in order to implement your idea? Because you cannot do things alone.
What are the key points of measuring success other than profit and number of units sold?
Customer retention. How long does a customer stay? Is it constantly reordering or not? This is one of the key success factors.
Cool. Thank you for this. And I'm asking this because many times you're talking about outbound, inbound, new GTM, trade shows, new customers and so forth. But the staying customers and the referrals might be the best thing to happen. And there is lower customer acquisition cost, but also you're building the product together in a partnership. As you said, it's no longer hit and run. It's more integrating into supply chains. Do you have another point to an SME owner who is just starting or thinking of starting to export or go international, or any other advice for the closing from your side?
I mean, one thing I would say, because I felt the pressure myself when I opened my companies, it's about you compete with the market with your prices. My finding is low prices can open the door, but reliability.
Thank you very much, Alexander, for your time, for accepting to being a part of the Exports Insights podcast, and hope that people will enjoy this episode.